Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the big extension that Sebastian Aho has signed with the Carolina Hurricanes. Do want to apologize, obviously this is not the normal setup and the dog does not want to budge, so I'm sitting here, I'm not exactly sure if this is centered. Anyway, that being said, let's get on into it. So Aho has signed a 8-year, $78 million extension, which is a little less than $10 million per year. And what exactly does this mean for Carolina, and kind of what is the legacy that we could see Aho have by the time that this deal is done? Well, it's tough to say. Let's talk about the legacy part first. He's already got 218 goals, which is 5th all-time for the Hurricanes, and it probably will definitely be 4th by, the early stages of the season. Basically, he just needs 2 more goals to move into 4th all-time for franchise history, and definitely could be in a spot where we see him at 3rd by the end of the year. A guy that routinely could get 30 plus goals. So yeah, definitely going to be a guy that gets into the top 3 range very, very soon. As for assists, he is currently 6th with 250, if I'm not mistaken here, but could possibly actually crack into 3rd as well this season, which would, interestingly enough, put him above Rod Brind'Amour, the head coach for the Carolina Hurricanes. So it would be kind of a fun thing to say, hey, coach, I'm better than you. I have a better legacy than you. And we can prove it by the fact that I have more assists with the franchise than you do. And then finally for points, he has 468, which is 5th, but could move him into 3rd by the end of the year. I think he needs about 77 points to make this thing happen, but all around a guy that is already in the top 5 for the key important things and is working his way to being in that top 3, which of course it being Ron Francis and Eric Staal. So with that being said, what is the overall thoughts on this deal? Well, the money is a lot. I mean, I'm absolutely aware of the fact that while this is a guy that is top 5 in multiple franchise categories, albeit a franchise that is broken up between the Whalers and the Hurricanes and isn't crazy old, it is kind of interesting to say that Carolina is going to be using this money for a guy like him. Nothing wrong with it because he is a good player, but $10 million, I think for a lot of people, if you saw just simple stats and you looked at what Aho is getting in terms of production with points and stuff like that, you would say $10 million, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But for the 26-year-old, happy birthday by the way, Aho, I think that this is a deal that, while it is a lot, could play out relatively well with the rising cap and all that situation. What you don't see with a lot of this stuff is the fact that he is a guy that plays physical when he has to, and is a guy that will forecheck, but also on top of that, is a guy that can use in a lot of different scenarios. They use him the 3rd most out of all their forwards for time on ice, and then time on ice per game played on the PK, and is a player that is a leader, and is kind of one of those guys that is here to stay. And I know that sounds kind of funny because if you're paying somebody $10 million a season, you would think that, yeah, they probably do want to stay, but Carolina obviously is not a traditional hockey market. It is not a franchise that has consistently had success when they've been in North Carolina. But obviously he's been part of that turnaround and is a player that genuinely wants to stay. I think a lot of guys could get drafted in the situation where he got drafted in and they weren't great right out of the gate and said, you know what, not a traditional market, not a team that is traditionally a well-off team, and not a team that regularly makes playoffs. I don't want to be here. Instead, he's been part of this turnaround, and I do think with the whole Montreal situation a couple years ago when he was an RFA and Montreal basically was like, we want him, and he signed the deal, I think it was just a ploy for him to be able to get Carolina to match it. And at the end of all this, I will say that for the past 5 years, he has been almost a point per game player. There's been times where he's cracked over the point per game mark, but over the past 5 seasons, he's like 10, 15 points away from being a point per game player. That's important for me. I don't really think that it's the end all be all, but I think in terms of promoting it to fans that are more traditionalists, to say points are all this, to say we've got a guy that is able to consistently help us out in terms of when he's out on the ice versus the production we're getting offensively is great. And again, like I said, I do think a lot of his value could be seen in ways that aren't that traditional point. That being said, I also think this is really good too because it gives him some stability going forward. Yes, they're probably not going to make a trade for Erik Karlsson, at least right now, putting out a video for that was recorded 2 days ago. So if you hear me talk about him possibly being traded to Carolina, ignore that part. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I do think in terms of stability for the long-term future, This sets them up pretty well and allows them to kind of focus on what is their long-term vision for this franchise that's right on the cusp of being a Stanley Cup winner. They obviously have only won one in the Hurricanes franchise history back in 2006, the summer going into my first grade year, so it's been a minute, but this is a club that is a great side that has the potential to be in the Stanley Cup final and to win it. How do you do so? You manage to retain players. Again, this is a lot of money, but with the rising cap, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And if Aho continues to get better, he's 26 as of today, mind you. Again, happy birthday. This could be great. And really, at this point, I'm not really going to compare him to Ron Francis just yet in terms of those all-time lists, because Francis, yeah, he did play for the Hurricanes, but a lot of it was with the Whalers. He played some with the Penguins, which doesn't really count as a franchise record. But I think for him, it's really about getting to second all-time, where you are above Eric Staal, where Staal obviously had a pretty impressive career with the Hurricanes. And if Aho doesn't get some of Francis's numbers by the end of his career, again, for me, it's about being the best player that played so many years for Carolina. Staal did so. Aho well on his way to possibly being another lifer with the Hurricanes. Now, I guess, obviously Staal wasn't, but he looked like he could have been. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this deal? I apologize for having it out so late. I know it happened like 5 or 6 hours ago. I had overtime, so I had to work 2 hours later. I had to get the dog out, all that stuff, get a snack too, and then I saw the news. But anyway, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and you will love hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.